Today's episode is a doozy. It's Herb. Herb and I are going to hash out the point of diminishing returns. But we're also going to cover an audiophiliac viewer system of the day. And then at the very end, you guys, if you so desire, can have one-on-one conversations with Herb. And believe me, you will. It's a roller coaster ride. It truly is. You will have a blast, as I always do, talking to her. But I've been doing this for over 20 years. But in any case, that's what I have in store for today. But we're going to start at the beginning. Yes, we are. How do we get to the point of diminishing returns? Everybody loves that. Everybody wants to believe there is such a thing. I'm not so sure. But Herb definitely has ideas. You start first.
You just said it. Everybody wants to believe it.
Uh-huh.
And before I ever worked for Stereophile, I sold $90,000 25-watt amp. Mm-hmm. And I sold a $250,000 50-watt amp.
These are audio notes, yeah.
And people, I remember really clearly back in the 70s getting Audio Magazine and dividing watts per dollar. And then I would factor in low distortion. And the one where I got the most low distortion watts, according to my mathematics on my calculator, was the best value for the money.
Uh-huh. Dollar per watt, okay.
And how much low distortion.
Oh, distortion.
And low dollar, 50 cents a watt at 0.003 was better than $1 a watt at 0.01.
Oh, I see, okay, I think. Okay.
And
where did that get you?
Well,
what did you buy now that you had it all figured out?
The only time I ever bought anything, I bought a Kenwood integrated.
You bought a lot of things.
And I bought some Hafler stuff sort of based on that. And it was, but I wasn't the only one, is the point. Lots of people were dividing this out and seeing, and I think they're doing it today, which is the reason I bring this up.
Using math.
It sort of bugs me that people are looking for watts per dollar.
Still?
Yeah.
No.
Oh, no, that's the whole idea. Class
so.
D is all about.
Oh, well,
The purpose of Class D is watts per dollar, right? Otherwise, why would you want something that's not Class A?
I mean, Class D exists because it's lighter, it doesn't have a big heavy transformer, it runs cooler. There's all that other reason why people love Class D. I mean, I think manufacturers love Class D the best because they don't have to have the expensive parts inside the amplifier anymore. I think that's the primary motivating force. And shipping, yeah, and all that other stuff. But, it's complicated as everything is. But, I mean, the advantage to consumers, I don't want people to think I'm a total idiot, is if with Class D amplifiers, they're more efficient, so a Class A amplifier is going to suck a lot of power out of your wall, and a Class D amplifier for the same power is going to suck a lot less. Suck a lot less, you get it? Suck less. Anyway, point of diminishing
in 1966, 67, when transistors were really coming in, there was a point at which tube manufacturers, which includes the big ones, Mac and Marantz, etc., they switched from, more a little earlier, maybe around when stereo came in, about 1960, they switched from triode amplification to pentode, tetrode, beam power tubes. Why? Because in push-pull, which required feedback, they could get 30, 40, 60 watts to drive these new, less sensitive speakers that had lower impedances. Right. And they could say, look, we make 100 watts into 4 ohms.
Right.
And it was a selling point. It introduced itself just like push-pull. Pentodes appeared mainly for the same reason Class D did. We could sell more amps, they're lighter weight, and they had to be Class A-B. They couldn't be Class A anymore, which, directly heated triode had to be Class A. This wasn't a question. And so all of a sudden you have all these more options. And people are still, that hasn't really changed. They're still kind of fooling around. But
more is better. This is... Go with that.
Who said that? That sounds like editorial, though. It sounds like the ad department is writing that.
More is not better? Oh, I just have a question. It just popped into my head. When people manufacturers refer, and sometimes reviewers refer to Class A amplifiers, they always put pure in front of it. Pure Class A.
Really?
Is there a difference between Class A and pure? Because pure Class A definitely sounds better. Purity is important. I'm kidding. But is pure better? Pure Class A, is it
Now
better?
my hard drive's skipping. Like, what?
Is pure Class A
What?
better
I'm
than
like the
just
dog.
impure Class A? Yeah, impure Class A and pure
In
Class
Class A, the current is running constantly, and the wave, your signal is not being clipped at all.
Okay.
During any part of it, it's all on. If you turn the signal off part of the time, you're using less energy. But in order to linearize that, you need feedback.
Right.
I don't know what pure Class A means. Class A is Class A as far as I can tell.
Sounds like marketing speak to me. What do you think?
The struggle that people
sounds good.
What does?
Pure.
Yeah, well, pure is a good word. I sometimes use it to emphasize something.
It's a purity test.
It's an adjective, correct?
Yeah,
or did I miss that part?
I don't know. You're the writer.
I don't know what an adjective is.
I don't know either. I barely understand the audio. But anyway, so we got past the pure Class A and the point of diminishing returns.
Now, I don't personally believe in it. I think and this is from having sold really expensive stuff. I think you get what you pay for. Right. And people go, well, I can't hear the difference. I go to a show, a $2,000 amp sounds almost as good as a $20,000 amp. Right. And I'm going, well, maybe there's something wrong with the $2,000 or $20,000 amp.
Right.
When we were selling Audio Note, and it was hideously priced back in 1994. I mean, $90,000 for an amp.
Can you imagine? That's when $90,000 was a lot of money. Now it's kind of moderate.
Right. Yeah. I had to learn when I first started. I had to learn how to say, well, how much is that amp? $90,000.
This is the Gaku one. No, the Ongaku.
Right. This is the Ongaku.
Ongaku. Right.
But to be able to say, actually, I can't say that I could say that straight up, $90,000.
Yeah.
But people would say, well, how do I know if it's worth that?
Good question.
And this would be at CES or shows.
And then they'd say it's the point of diminishing returns?
We didn't get to that part.
Oh, okay.
But they'd say, so what makes it worth it?
Good
and
question.
I would send them out in the hall at the show, and I'd say, just go to any 2 other rooms, random. Just walk into 2 rooms, sit down, listen to a couple pieces of music, and then come in. And as you're walking in the door, if you can't tell before you sit down if it's worth it or not,
it's not worth it.
It's not worth it to you.
Yeah, you have hit the point.
It should be obvious. And the difference, that's my take on diminishing returns. Mm-hmm. Diminishing is a question of perception.
Right.
These are intangibles. You pay extra, not for a lower THD and noise spec. You're paying extra for things that people haven't figured out how to measure or choose not to measure. Okay. And I call them intangibles. But sometimes the intangibles become overwhelming, but it doesn't mean you can hear that. And so it's only diminishing. But the only thing that's diminishing is your ability to discriminate. Okay. Not the quality necessarily.
Right.
In theory, discrimination is what's involved. And, could you tell the difference between Coke and Pepsi or expensive wine and non-expensive wine, et cetera, et cetera?
Yeah, et cetera, et cetera. Well, I have a theory about the point of diminishing returns, and that is that it depends on the person who's, spending the money, but also, you have that great line, you can't hear what you're not looking for, listening for.
I was getting to that.
I'm sorry.
I'm teasing you.
But anyway, so I think what at first, let's say the difference between, let's say, $1,000 amplifier and a $2,000 amplifier, right? You might, at some point in your journey, your audio journey, you might say, they sound close enough. I'll buy the $1,000 amp instead of the $2,000 one, right? But that's where you were at that moment when you made that decision, assuming it was a fair comparison, right? But as your ear gets better and you listen more and you're understanding what's going down as you're listening, maybe 2 years later, 3 years later, 4 years later, if you did that same comparison, the 1,000 to the 2,000, you might say, no, now I hear it, and the $2,000 amp is worth the difference. So the point, let's call it a floating point. It's not like it doesn't stay in place. It moves as your ear gets educated, as your taste in music gets more sophisticated. You learn how to listen to nuance and other things that are going on in the music. So as you grow and learn, your point moves with you.
Correct.
Right? course, when you get old and deaf, your point would go down again.
You don't get old and deaf. That goes with the diminishing returns. I actually believe it's the opposite.
Okay.
If I'm old, I'm genuine old.
He's even older than me.
I'm
Just
older than him.
Just a little bit.
And the longer you listen, you know, it was Roy Hall that said, Herb, if you have to go in the same room as the stereo to know if it's any good, you shouldn't be a reviewer. You're not properly equipped.
That's a Roy line,
and you know what?
sure.
He's partly right.
Yeah, okay.
What it is, you kind of learn to recognize a matrix. And it takes a lifetime to recognize that matrix. And that matrix grows. I've only been doing this reviewing at Stereophile for not that many years.
8, 7?
Something like that. And what I've noticed is my ability to like walk into the room and recognize that matrix, to hear. And I throw out it took 8 years to throw out the checklist, you know, the sort of bass, treble, middle, image. I mean, I've learned to focus on a good example, when I use the word intangible, how the music, the intensity of how the speaker just throws the sound into the room is something most people would not sit down and notice. The actual density of the sound. And this isn't something you can measure with a microphone in an anechoic chamber, because it's just measuring amplitude. But I can play 2 different recordings or 2 different amplifiers, or in this case, I'm reviewing a preamp, and the only thing I changed was the preamp. And the power, the force, the energy, the density of the sound became more like, I hate to say it, live. You know, it had more, like, you know, Steve and I, for 100 years we've known each other, we walk down the street and we've been going, so what is it that makes the piano coming out of there, or the guy trumpet in my building coming out of the window, you know instantly it's real. It is intensity, I believe. Right. Anyhow, blah, blah, blah.
I got another angle on this, though. So if I was in somebody's home a year or so ago, and they had a piano in the room with the system, which I think is kind of weird. But anyway, and you know who it is. But anyway, and if you listen to a piano recording, a really, really good recording of a really great system, and there just happens to be a piano in the room, and you hit one note on the piano and hear the actual piano versus the sound of a recording of a piano, it's pretty freaking drastic.
It is.
Right? It's not so. And
But why?
And you don't have to play. You don't even have to play chords or music. You just hear one note. You go, holy, these are in different universes, right? And I think it is intensity, but I also think it's like harmonic information. There's a density to the sound of the actual piano versus the sound coming out of the speakers. And they are miles apart from each other. Now, it's not to say that a better system, that's, you know, higher up in the point of diminishing returns scale, would get closer to the sound of the actual piano. Absolutely. But in terms of getting all the way there, even if you made worse, if you made a recording of a piano in the room and then played it back over the speakers, that's a whole can of worms, because you'd be recording the sound of the piano, and then it's a mess. And even if you close mic the piano. But anyway, the point is, I think the difference between live sound and recorded sound is my favorite word for it right now, at least, is density. There's just more. Density. There's more going on.
I call it believable. In fact, I believe the problem with digital, since the first day it appeared, put the CD in the CD player and you go, it sounded canned. You know, it didn't have that snap, boogie, pop. Yeah. And then the longer I listened, and I listened to some pretty fancy digital anymore by any measure, and believable corporality is what's really, it's been missing all along. And I feel like we're in a really good period right now. It's coming back. And I think if the next 5 years, for example, in audio, if it focuses on density, intensity, and believable corporality, things like this, everyone will benefit.
Okay, I'll give you that. So last night I was listening to the clipped RP 600, and I was thinking, man, that speaker is so good. And this was with the Denon.
I love that.
$450 Denon integrated amp, the PMA 600NE. I'm gonna do an episode about that, and also this tube amplifier, the Risung, I think it's A10, the single-ended EL34 amp, which is $450. I've yet to do it, but I will soon. And in any case, listening with it down on, it was just, man, that is a freaking great speaker. In terms of, well, speaking to me. I was listening to the Grateful Dead. I've been hung up on the Grateful Dead lately. And I'm listening to American Beauty. And I'm just thinking, it's such a gorgeous recording. I mean, it sounds gorgeous on pretty much any halfway decent system. But there's just something about the way the 600M just gets to me. It speaks to me. It really, really does. Now, what does the Cornwall do? The Klipsch Cornwall that's more than 10 times the price? There's more weight to it. It plays louder. It's more dynamic. It's got more balls.
Goes lower.
It goes lower. It's a bigger version, literally and figuratively. It's a bigger version of the 600M. The basic of the sound of the way it works, well, they're both horn speakers, is very similar. But is it worth 10 or probably more like 12 times as much? No, it's not.
I don't agree.
It's not worth 12 times.
It is.
But well,
it plays more records without you wondering why. And I am the biggest fan of the RP600.
Okay.
But your Cornwells will play. Let's pick out a record. It doesn't matter which record you pick. You might pick a few records that you were wishing you didn't have the 600.
Okay. But in any case, this is the way it strikes me, is that it does, but the similarities are bigger than the differences. Maybe that's another way of saying it. But sure,
yes.
If you got the money and you got the space, because the Cornwall's a much, much, much bigger speaker, and it might be too big for a lot of rooms. But what it does, in some ways, here's the complicated part, it's a bargain at $6,000. How many audiophile speakers that are this big cost $6,000 or more than that, right? Like the Wilson Tiny Tot, which last time I checked was about $10,000.
For stereophile, I compared my Falcon Gold badges, which are $3,000, to a $30,000 speaker. And many people said, Herb, that's ridiculous. You can't compare speakers like that. And my answer was, it's kind of like, you can't, I mean, it's like ball player. If this ball player is taller and he makes $1 million a year and this ball player is shorter and he only makes $500,000 a year, can I not compare how they play in the ball game? Mm-hmm. And on any given day, that $500,000 player might outplay. Okay. But the point is, everyone knows the Falcons at this point, or it has a broad base. It's like the LS50 Meta or the LS50. This is something. Everyone knows what a quarter feels like in their hand. It's very similar. Okay. Whereas a $30,000 speaker, maybe nobody that's reading the article will know what that thing could sound like. Right. They have nothing to compare it to. Right. There's nothing in their pockets. Right. And I think a lot of people, in this range that you and I cover a lot, speakers that are this big, for example, what is the difference between the Klipsch, the little Klipsch, 600, right, and all the other little speakers, and some of it is density, intensity, believable. It jumps into the room in a different way. It throws the music out differently. That would be my take.
Yeah, definitely.
And I think that's why it pops out of the deck all the time as something like, oh, I'm going to put that in and listen. I actually want to put it in many times.
Yeah, no, it's amazing. So anyway, I think where this all leads to is, there is no point of diminishing returns that's applicable to other people. You find your own point of diminishing returns for where you are in your audio journey. That's a real thing. Because
you are.
Because you could say, I don't hear enough of a difference with the $2,000 amp compared to the $1,000 amp. That's a very real thing. And if you don't hear the difference, you shouldn't spend twice as much money. That's easy, Unless you're thinking, well, I can't hear it now, but everyone's telling me the $2,000 one is better than the $1,000 one. I'm going to do it, and later I'll appreciate that. That's also a consideration. And that's why, this is why audio to me is endlessly fascinating, because it's really, really hard to nail down. Because you're changing, the music's changing, your systems, everything's always in flux, right? So the point of diminishing returns at any given time is a real thing for each of us, no doubt, absolutely. And of course, there may be a point where you say, I know there's better out there, and it's not that it costs more or whatever, it's just that I'm happy with what I have. And And that's a really good place to be. You can listen to more music or buy more music or whatever. You don't have to keep spending more and more and more on your hi-fi. That's, of course, I don't want to lose you as a viewer. And Herb doesn't want to lose you as a reader. But there is a point where you may say, I'm good. This is nice.
I think that's not... I want to point out something really important about that's good, this is nice. The system that I'm standing next to, it wasn't there yesterday. I change my system almost daily, but certainly several times a week. And I can tell you one thing, you can write this down. The differences between components at even the same price or the difference of price, it's not usually subtle. Mm-hmm. I'm sorry, you don't have to, I think I see a bigger soundstage, maybe that much. No. If it's subtle, it's not real.
Yeah, if it's subtle, don't worry about it.
Right, don't worry about it.
It's not worth spending.
Not important.
Yeah, if we have to bring it down to money and what you're spending for your system because you got other things in your life, yeah, if you're struggling to hear the difference, then it's not important. It's not worth doing.
Yeah.
Really. But you know what is worth doing? I got a great idea. What I've just done. You guys out there, you can talk to her one-on-one. Isn't that an amazing thing? I mean, before the internet and stuff, this would have been really hard to get done. But right now, you can talk directly to her. For a fee, of course, not for free. But
the difference isn't subtle.
And the difference is not subtle between not talking to her and talking to her. Day and night difference. Because otherwise you'd be talking to yourself. But anyway, Herb is available for one-on-one phone conversations. And you've been doing this a while.
Yeah, I've been doing it since we did the last thing.
Right, and you seem to really enjoy it.
Well, not only do I enjoy it, but what it is it's like you don't really know who's out there. And now I'm talking to people in all different parts of the world. I mean, in war zones. And you're talking to somebody on the phone, and they're in a war zone. And it's like, and then people in little towns in Arkansas and places that I've been. And it's almost like it's a getting to know each other. Who is that person? Because I admit, when I type stuff up, it's a formal composition. It's a creation. I'm building a building. It's not the same. Or even when we're talking now, there's a lot of cautions.
You were just exhibiting caution as we were talking?
Yeah.
I hadn't picked up on that.
I self-edit. I learned that. That's when you get old, you self-edit.
Oh, I see. Okay.
There's more kind of directness.
So, if you want to talk to her and have as much fun as I do, here's how you're going to reach her. Right there.
Go close.
There we go. Okay?
Ishmael39 at earthlink.net.
There we go. Anyway, thank you guys for watching.
Thank you. And for reading.
And you know what? Just in case, if you haven't had enough of this, I will throw in, at no extra charge, an Audiophiliac viewer system of the day right now.
Ah.
Yeah. So this one comes from Mark. He is in Paris, France. Lucky guy. And he has 2 sets of speakers there. One set is a triangle signature theta. And he also has vintage Altec 604E speakers in custom cabinets. I assume he moves each one into position to play. He doesn't usually have them in front of each other like that. Anyway, he also has a pair of 1960s Gaylord Europe vintage mono amplifiers that were built in France. And also a Steve Berger custom phono preamp and also custom mono single-ended triode amplifiers. Then for the turntable, he has a Centec EQ variable curve mono tube preamp. And for the Thorns TD124, it's loaded with modifications. And by the way, the turntable, it might not be obvious at first, has 2 tone arms, a Fidelity Research FR64S that has Clement mono and Ortofon SPU cartridges. The second tone arm is a Gray Research 108B that he uses to play 78s. For streaming, there's an Auralic Aries Mini, and DAC is an RME ADI2, and the cables throughout the system are by AudioQuest. Thank you, Mark. Okay, I am back. We are back. Herb and I are back. So, again, thank you guys for watching. My name is Steve Guttenberg. This is Herb Reichert. And we hope to see you back here again very, very soon.
Thank you, guys.
Bye-bye.